Greetings from Philadelphia. My name is Bernie S., and I have the honor and the privilege of introducing my friend Tiffany Rad as a Hope 2020 keynote speaker. Well over a decade ago, I met Tiffany at a small hacker conference in Philadelphia and came to learn about her amazing background as a hacker, going back to when she ran a BBS as a teenager, to becoming a lawyer after being inspired to do something about injustices in our criminal justice system, in particular with unfair prosecutions of hackers. Tiffany realized that back in the 1990s, technologically ignorant defense attorneys, prosecutors, and judges were ill prepared to competently handle cases against hackers. And she told me that inspired her to become a lawyer, and that inspires me. Tiffany's work went on to include finding vulnerabilities in transportation and critical infrastructure, and she became an expert in car hacking and the battle between car owners and car manufacturers over access to the technology inside automobiles. Tiffany's work has inspired so many people in the hacker community, and there's much more I could say about that, but I want to hear what she has to say. So here's Tiffany Rad.
Thanks very much, Bernie. Yeah, I have been attending Hope, believe it or not, for 20 years. It's been a long time that I've been in this community, and I've really enjoyed the hacker community in New York City in particular, meeting up with you all at 2600, and it has been a long time. But that's, my first presentation was about 10 years ago at Hope. I was talking about the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and I'll get to that and how that particular piece of legislation really affects hackers. So does the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, but for the work I do, it's a lot more with DMCA stuff. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, how I got to do this kind of stuff. And it's not a normal type of path that many people take through the educational system to become, go to college, law school, all these things. It's different. And I want to talk to you too about if you have a different type of background, it is possible to do this type of research, get into law, and the cybersecurity field is so vast right now. Whatever your background is, I bet that there's a place that you can fit in with some of the stuff that's going on right now. So let me tell you a little bit more about my background, but I chose the title To Drive or Be Driven because I'm doing a lot of work now with vehicle cybersecurity. I have been for about 15 years, even at the time when there were very few computers in the cars that could be, you could interact with. Still had a fuel injection computer, had airbags in the car. I needed to turn them off to do off-roading. That was a bit of a challenge. So that's one of the things that inspired me to learn how to hack cars. But I want to kind of go back a little bit and tell you about my background, because as Bernie has mentioned, 2600 wanted me to talk more about how I got to where I am today, and to talk to all of you about what you can do. And believe it or not, I teach at 2 universities. A college degree helps, but it is not required to do this kind of work. Many of us from this genre are self-taught. You can do this too. So I chose To Drive or Be Driven because the choices we're making right now regarding who controls the code, everything from vehicles to planes to your phones, things like that, voting machines, it's very critical right now, the decisions that are being made. That's going to either allow researchers like hackers out there like you to be able to access this, or whether we will be locked out or threatened with legislation, not legislation, but criminal and civil penalties if we were to get into this. So that's why it's kind of a choice. That's one of the reasons I chose that topic for the title. Let me tell you a little bit more about my background. I'm the CEO of a startup. So in 2015, I was working for a really big IT company, probably the biggest in the US. and I got kind of tired of like the large corporate culture. So I thought, I'm going to start my own company. I have an idea for something, and I think it's going to work. So I got some funding from the state of Virginia and grants. I've run this company so far with that type of thing, with grants in particular. So my background before that was I worked for Cisco. That was a very large IT company. And I've also been teaching cybersecurity for a very long time. Back early when I started teaching, some of the professors were a little concerned. They're like, why are you teaching computer science students how to hack? are you maybe teaching criminals? And I said, no, no, no. If they don't learn how these things are broken, they're not going to learn how to fix them. So are we really putting out graduates who are going to be designing systems if they don't know how these systems are commonly broken? So I still do this in my classes. Actually, I'm going to show you in the presentation one of the devices that I got a grant and was able to build something cool for my students, but it's all part of, you got to learn how to break it if you want to learn how to fix it. So I've taught my classes like that. Recently, actually within the past year, I've joined UC Berkeley School of Information and Cybersecurity, and I teach for them. But I've been teaching for the University of Maine system for, a long time, maybe 14 years. My research that I've done has encompassed everything from vehicles to industrial control systems. We did one in 2011. It was 2011, that was called the prison hack. And I'll tell you a bit about that too, but what was special about that project for me in particular was I got to work with my father, and a lot that I'd learned, some of my childhood growing up, was seeing what he did and being inspired by some of his work to get to where I am here today. Also, more recently, I suppose, Mr. Robot is a fantastic hacker series on USA Network. I loved it. They took our prison hack and they put it into an entire episode of Mr. Robot. It was in season 1 and it was titled Brave Traveler. So if you, I think it's available now on YouTube, you can watch that. But it really was really interesting to see sort of like the nightmare type of security researchers episode of where they took your hack and put it into a TV show. It was interesting to see, but it was scary in the sense that we were worried after we did this. We did not release our 0 day to the public, to anyone actually at all. It never touched the internet, but we were concerned that that someone would take this and do bad things with it. But disclosure, I'm going to talk about too. It was important to do this disclosure. We did our presentations at conferences, but we talked to the company, the organization that was affiliated with protecting the prison systems before we went and did our research presentation. So this is my dad and my research team. That's Teague Newman there. We've worked together for many years, but this is a picture of my dad. This is CCC when we did our 2011 prison break presentation in Germany. And the photo on the right that you see, this is my dad showing people how a commonly, this type of security device is in a lot of places. It has an error in the code. For those of you that are computer scientists, it's like the gate was wrong. The way that it was designed was that you could trick one piece working and then the other one wouldn't work. So if you knew what that was, you could get into buildings, get into places, because you could be unseen by this device. And it was a coding problem. So my dad is here at a conference. It's literally in an aircraft hangar in Florida. We were teaching for a program called Go Ruck. They had a 007 program, and he was there teaching that. And Teague Newman and I taught lockpicking for this one. But again, it's about this sense of learning how to break things so you can build them and design them better, being able to legally talk about our vulnerabilities that we found and the exploits we used. Super important for improving security. So when I was a kid, we had 13 phone lines coming into our house. I remember that the neighbors thought we were in gambling or something like that because the BBS that my brother had set up had so many users. This was way back in, like, I think the 80s. So we had a lot of phone lines so we could accommodate more people wanting to use it. But that was one of the first times that I was able to really learn a lot about BBSs and dialing numbers from those of us who had BBSs, we'd share numbers about, try this number, this is a pretty cool site to try. And so it was a very exciting time. And I got into computers because of that. Talking to users as a sysop was a lot of fun. But when I got a little bit older, I learned about what my dad did, and it's an interesting background. My dad was a field agent for the CIA, and his specialty was Sino-Soviet affairs, but he would be hired, well, when he worked for the agency, I'm not sure what he did, because he didn't talk a lot about the stuff he did then. He quit at some point, and then when he quit, he had this really interesting skill set where he could break into a lot of places, and he had the skills to do it. So he set up a consulting firm, and it was one of the first of its kind to do what we now call red team work. So back in the 70s and early 80s, my dad would tell me, I break into places so bad people can't break into places. And that made sense to me. Later, that line was said in the movie Sneakers, which is not a coincidence. My dad was one of the technical advisors for the movie, but he added a lot of to the script as well. So he didn't just decide on the sneaks, as he called them, and he called these his break-in sneaks through his entire career. But it was also he added to the script. So in every one of the sneaks that you see in the movie Sneakers, it featured Robert Redford, and I think it came out in 1982, perhaps. But in every one of the scenes, he wrote in something that was maybe a little bit technically inaccurate. So if you try to copy that and you were a thief, you would probably get caught. And later in life, and actually 2 years ago, he started giving presentations about how you could really do it, what he wrote into these scenes that was technically inaccurate. He felt like for him, it was a choice of ethics. He didn't have to do that, but still the movie is extremely realistic, and it had a lot to do with how these were some of the real types of sneaks that he did and the techniques he'd actually successfully used. And interestingly enough, all the years that my dad was hired to do these physical break-ins using electronic systems too. He didn't use computers until a lot later in his career, but he never got caught. So pretty extraordinary background to have my dad coming home from projects where he would give us little bits of information that was so interesting to hear that I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of neat. I wonder what I could do that's similar to this. Then I got to college, and in college I met with at first it was my first experience meeting up with people who were hackers, and I went to college in Pittsburgh, and that's one of the times when they said, there's this guy named Kevin Mitnick, and Kevin Mitnick has an interesting case, and we talked a lot about it, and I started following his case, even all the way through law school. So it was so interesting to me about really the way that Mitnick's case went. It wasn't the way it was supposed to. There was injustice I saw in the way the system worked. I saw that there were attorneys that needed to have a technical background, or at least technical knowledge about how things worked to make it more fair. So I went to law school, and I didn't give up, though, on some of the technical interests I had growing up and started developing in college. So that's one of the things that I learned from my dad, and being able to work with him later was pretty exciting. All right, but when I was in college, I kind of got interested in some stuff, too, that helped me become a better researcher later in life. So does it seem kind of odd that my background was actually, I was studying to become an epidemiologist? I started tracking biological viruses to patient 0, and I did that for a level 5, like type of hot zone virus. And I spent 2 years of doing academic research between Oxford and then Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and this is one of the things that I started doing, was figuring out how you could take a question, where does this come from? And start tracking it, like meeting people, talking to people. I met someone on the plane that's like, hey, there's someone that sells these maps, and I went to Bolivia, into the Amazon basin, sells maps. So I collected maps, and I started pinpointing, when I talked to and interviewed people, where this virus might have come from and where it originated and what was causing the outbreak of the virus, which in this case was societal type of issues that were causing it. And it happened every year. That's one of the things I discovered that up to that time, the CDC had not known. So this was me in college, and I flew down to Bolivia on a $500 grant and lived down there for a couple of months, and I had a skill set that I was able to sort of trade to talk with doctors about the virus outbreaks that were occurring in their small jungle towns. I was an EMT, so I was able to assist them in the hospitals and learn from them about how these outbreaks occur. So creating a network of interviewing people and putting pieces together to see how they fit. Then later, I realized that some of the same research procedures that you'd use for tracking a biological virus, you could use to track one that's digital. So my background is not the same as a lot of students I teach, where they come in an undergraduate program and they're studying cybersecurity from the beginning. For me, I went through different types of backgrounds, and this was one. It's not related to law, but it was more related to later on when I started doing tracking digital viruses and worms, and being able to plot these types of things, where the instances were, what made it happen, did someone share something in particular? it was so similar to tracking the biological viruses. So, and I also learned how to create a research plan about what we're looking at from many different angles. So really that ability to look at anything, even I use this now as looking at a vehicle, what types of systems I can see from the outside of the vehicle, from the inside of the vehicle, what maybe had the manufacturers not considered when they had built this. And so I learned a lot of this from there. And the picture of me with the axe, not used for self-defense. We were loading equipment into a canoe, which was made out of a tree, by some people in the town. And we went down the Amazon basin, and we're talking to outposts where medical doctors had experienced part of this outbreak. So it was a very exciting time in my life. And I don't think I'd be here today doing what I do now, had I not gone and done this project. And it was really instrumental also to learning how to be independent and work alone, because I did this on my own with a grant from a consulting firm as a university student. So I really learned how to sort of make decisions and have the confidence to go in and do the research. And at times, sometimes you're on your own doing this stuff. So I learned very early on how to work independently. So this is me at the presentation that we did. So I'm kind of jumping ahead now to, I worked with my dad at this point in 2011. I have enough technical background, and actually my legal expertise are beginning to come into effect with the projects we're working on too. I started to work on this project with him and Teague Newman in 2011. In 2 weeks, we created a 0-day that means something that's brand new to no one, it hadn't been discovered before, for a programmable logic controller that was commonly used in lots of stuff. We know now in 2020 how much stuff, but back then, as a research team, there wasn't a whole lot out about industrial control systems and these types of critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. But we thought, okay, we could look at a lot of other things like braking systems and on trains, HVAC. This is the one that we felt like, okay, let's create a simulated prison in our basement. We bought the software from the company that made the product, and we were able to make it do things that it's not supposed to do. So we were able to make it look like if you were in the control tower in a prison, you would see on your screens everything would be locked down. But in fact, if you had used the exploit that we created, it would all be open up, all the doors straight out to the road. We were able to control. And the reason we chose prison systems is if anyone were able to replicate or wanted to replicate this, again, we did not, that 0-day, we did not release to anyone. We did it for a proof of concept, because at the time people were telling us those things are air gapped. That nothing is getting out of these facilities. We found that was not true, actually. So the reason we chose this is if someone used it, you'd still have to get by the guys with the guns if someone had opened it up. It had not happened and has not happened since. So this was one of the projects that I worked with my dad because he had designed the systems in the prisons. Teague Newman was a specialist with networking systems. And then we also had an exploit writer to work with us who was able to create the exploit code in just 2 weeks, working from our basement. So this really showed that it didn't take a nation state to be able to affect industrial control systems and PLCs. And so very exciting time. I was able to work with my dad one of the first times in my career. And we worked together on other projects since then. So for me, that was one of the most fantastic things about doing this project was going to conferences around the world, being able to do that with my dad. So that was great. I mean, someone who was an inspiration for me to get to where I am and to be up there on stage with him. It was very exciting. So this is one of the projects that we did together. And again, learning the research techniques I learned before was highly important for the work I did. What was also very important was my legal background. And this is one of the reasons why is I made sure we didn't have any DMCA issues, no issues with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. We didn't crack or break or exceed authorized access for the work that we did. We used the program in a way it wasn't intended to be used, but that we used the program. We didn't get into any of the particular code and affect it. But there are a lot of researchers that do, and they need to be able to test these systems to see if they are safe. That includes voting machines, medical devices. I have lots of friends that have encountered problems being able to access their systems and being able to do a responsible disclosure, phase disclosure, however you call it. But for me, I've been able to represent kind of like the man in the middle for researchers, where we do a responsible disclosure to the vendor. I've been doing that for 14 years. So back when computers were a lot more simple, it was actually harder to do the disclosures before the advent of the bug bounty programs. I'm very glad to see the bug bounty programs, because now we're able to contact a manufacturer, but also look to see, do they participate in this program or this program? And it's so much easier. When I do the disclosures now, and when I find that there's a company that doesn't have one, it's still kind of the old school way of disclosures. You usually have to contact the legal department, and they get kind of concerned about, hey, how is someone accessing our system? This sounds illegal to me. I said, no, actually, reverse engineering and things like that are legal. So let's talk about it. But it's so much easier with bug bounty programs. So I'm so glad that those have changed the responsible disclosure field that I've been working in for 14 years at this point. So it makes it easier for me too. We did this as well for our project, responsible disclosure. We actually were invited to CIA headquarters to do this disclosure, and that was a pretty cool experience in itself. But we're glad to discuss this before we went public at a conference. So now, what do I do today? I know Cory Doctorow was one of the keynotes here, and I'm so glad. I'd seen Cory Doctorow keynote at other at this I think it was this conference a long time ago, and he did a program for, I think, university in Australia called Car Wars. So if you go online, you can find Car Wars, and I think it's like about 45 minutes of an audio story that he created about car hacking. And I was so thrilled. And I think this was in maybe 2016 when he put this out. So if you're interested in car hacking, go listen to it, because some of the stuff that he was talking about, I'm like, yes, I've been working on this stuff with vehicles for years. And I'm so glad that someone like Cory Doctorow has put it into a fictional story that was very exciting, but it hit on the very important topic. So you'll see some quotes from Cory Doctorow in here. And also, the picture from Tron, this is it. A car is something like a computer you put your body into. It is very much like that. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important that we're able to access these types of systems, is this is part of our life and how we get around. And we have all these computers in our houses too. So I want to know what these things do. And I want to know that security researchers are looking at them as well. So these cars, you put these are real cars. These are images of real cars. Okay, so maybe that one looks as cool as Tron, but this one, I actually look more at stuff like this as well. So through my car hacking research that I've been doing for, I guess, about 15, 16 years now, I got inspired by people that do modifications to their vehicles. And for one reason or another, they mod their cars to go faster. Street racers, highly illegal, but I learn a lot from the way they do stuff. And from people that are hot rodders that swap out stuff that's not stock. And what I learned from that is when they also have to change some of the stuff that the devices that connect to the computer in the car, how do they do that? Because sometimes the manufacturer locks them out of changing this stuff up. These are the original car hackers. Before me, before anyone else at these conferences have done the hacks, it's the people that do the modifications. So I look at cars that kind of are super fast, like the one on the left, and then also the ones on the right have a lot to tell me about how they operate. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some of the stuff I'm working on right now that has to do with vehicles. But I'm going to also talk to you about, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you don't have to go to a university necessarily to learn this stuff. There's still a lot that's self-taught. And I'm going to show you some programs and places where you can go, where you can learn about this stuff too. So I do a lot with IoT. In particular, I did this for a defense contractor I worked for in the past, and for big IT companies. But I look at all this stuff. So when we again, going back to the research that I did way back in Bolivia in college, you first look at the macro vision of what the infrastructure looks like. And then you create your research plan to go deeper and deeper into each one of these. So when I look at vehicles, things such as actually cyber warfare affect this, because this is something that could be accessed maliciously. Cars are in here. I look at also the way that medical devices are accessed to. While that doesn't directly relate to cars, we need to have the ability for all these things to be accessed and assessed. And because I am a true believer that cybersecurity research, even when you don't work for a company, when you're doing this independently, is very important. You'll hear me saying that a lot because I've been fighting for this for so many years. And every now and then I feel like we slip with some of the legal protections that we have to do this type of research. So it's just kind of a reminder. One of the things we think about is if you're not a computer scientist, every computer scientist kind of studies this as I think is part of the curriculum, but if you're designing the code, who controls the code has a lot to do with how this trolley problem works. So the guy in the middle there with the switch is, it's you. Maybe you work for a large company, you work for a manufacturer, whatever you might be developing, you are the one who's creating the code. So how that code operates, you move that switch. So it can either go one way or the other. So the trolley problem classic is, how is it programmed? Is it programmed to protect the driver? Is it programmed to protect a lot of people in a crosswalk in a city? How does that operate differently with cars know with geolocation where you are when you're out in a rural area? So how the code works, I feel like as drivers, we want to know this, even though we're putting our bodies into these computers and we truly only have a license to the software that runs all these vehicles. We don't own that. When you buy a car, you own the metal, the rubber tires, but you have a license to a lot of the stuff that controls how your vehicle works. So I want to know these things. So the trolley problem applies for what I'm considering, but you wouldn't want this. You wouldn't want Lightning McQueen to look like this. I love this picture because it really comes down to who controls the code. Even if you have a vehicle that has, maybe we're at level 5. I'll tell you what that is with autonomous vehicles in the next few years. But I want to know who's contributed to that code, and have any security researchers been hired by that company to do kind of red team testing. You'd think this is this isn't a new concept for manufacturers, but for some of them it still is. They're worried about hiring people to break their stuff. But luckily over many years, we're getting to a point where I've worked with many manufacturers and they're becoming a little more comfortable with let's talk about how we can do some of this testing. So I'm glad we're getting there. So here's the DMCA for those of you who don't know what it is. But essentially, if you're a researcher, you can't investigate and discover these security vulnerabilities if it requires reverse engineering or circumventing some types of controls. So if the manufacturer put in sort of like a lock on the code, where if you go beyond this point, you're not authorized to be there, or you can't do that because we've locked it down and it's for copyright protection. Since 2010, I've been talking about the copyright protection argument. I understand what they're saying. I think that the creators of this piece of legislation were more talking about, at the time, movies and music, back in the Napster days. And it now has trickled down to, why can't we access voting machines? This is so important to our democracy. What about the medical devices that are going in our bodies? Is there a report that maybe we can read that hackers have created about, hey, we hacked this pacemaker and it has these vulnerabilities. Maybe you don't want your doctor to put this one in, or tell the company, we're not going to buy these products unless they've been tested. So, and tested red team way, not just does it work. So, so this is some of the things that are important. And the DMCA is something I've been fighting against for years. Let me tell you some more about what I've done with it. So it doesn't just affect car hackers, tractors, would you believe? Indeed, when there's a Library of Congress review of the DMCA, this group showed up en masse. I mean, there were a lot of people that said, we need to access our tractors. Well, if you think about this, some of these farm vehicles cost as much as the average house. And if you can't fix it, you got to take it to the manufacturer and have, sometimes, a crane has to show up. They put it on a giant flatbed, like double wide trailer, drive it, a day in the other direction. And then you can't use it for a while they update some of the code on the computer. These are very computerized. I mean, these are not just simple tractors like for mowing your lawn. These do a lot of really cool stuff, including like how, with some of these devices, how deep a seed gets planted, being able to map out the farm fields. This kind of stuff actually is part of critical infrastructure with the farming in the US. So security on these devices, tractors, planters, seeders, very important. So they're interested in fixing their stuff and knowing if there are problems. So they were actually very, very interested in their fight to repair. So now this is what happened recently. So let me I'm going to open up all these for you. So there is an exemption that exists right now. If you're a car hacker, if you hack voting machines, if you hack medical devices, these are some of the things that are protected, and you can sort of break the DMCA to do this type of research. I think it's every 3 years. I might be wrong about that exact date, but the next time it's up is 2021, so it's coming up next year. People show up at the Library of Congress and other places they've set up to do hearings. So you can get up and say, hey, this is important for me to have this exemption for this reason. So the last time there was a hearing, I was working for an employer who did not want me to participate in that, so I did not. But other years I have, perhaps anonymously. But when the hearings take place, if this is something you care about, make note of when those are. And you can write an anonymous, letter to the Library of Congress about why it's important to you to be able to hack, and in particular specific examples of I do this, I work on this. If I couldn't, if I didn't know this about it, this would make my job harder to do. So you have to have good faith security research, meaning you can't go out and sell your exploit or you sell your vulnerability. They don't want to see that you're making money because they don't consider that to be good faith security research. So that's one of the things that's a little bit different. I guess one of the other things is, okay, responsible disclosure. I think it's kind of a popular topic now. It is not legally required. However, as is important in here, to get this exemption, they want to see that you've made an effort to contact the manufacturer about anything that you've discovered that may affect the safety or security of their devices, of a car, something like that. But you're not required to do that. But it does go to show you're a good faith security researcher, so you have a choice, but it absolutely is not required. If you want to stay anonymous and do this type of research, that's totally up to you. But I think that some people think you have to do a disclosure on any type of research, not even that, that this covers. You do not, but some researchers find it to be, it's part of what they do. We're working to solve a problem. So disclosure is something that can help. So here's a Cory Doctorow comment. This is pretty much saying that, we need to be able to access these devices. We don't really want to have to go to the manufacturer to say, hey, I want to unlock this thing. I think there's a problem, or, you need to be able to do this yourself. This picture is from someone's car. They did something akin to Car Shark. So someone I know has been hacking a lot of the devices that output information to the driver. So, but I really do like this, and it really shows. It goes to show who controls the code, and if we need to fight to continue to have access to this, I really would like. Wouldn't it be nice? Okay, Library of Congress, if you're listening to this, please give us a permanent exemption. Every time this comes up, they have an option of giving a permanent exemption for hacking cars for this research, medical devices again, and voting machines. Those are the three big ones for safety and security. And it would be so nice if we didn't have to keep going back. Just grant us the permanent exemption would be nice. So then we don't have to worry about going to these manufacturers and all that. So this is some of the stuff I look at when I do any type of device, and sometimes it might be network systems. It might be even looking at malware. Again, look at the research perspective. If you learn how to think like a researcher and how to break things and what might not have been covered, well, at least back to my Bolivia example, in medical journals. I read every single medical journal ever published about that virus before I did the research. It took me 2 years to do it. And I was like, what are they missing? What's not included here? And that's how I came up with my my thesis and my research topic, is I did find stuff that wasn't known, and I was just a college student. But anyway, this is sometimes I look at. Think about how your car operates. Think like a bad guy. I teach all my students this too, much to the chagrin of sometimes the traditional computer science professors. This is some of the angles of attack that we look at. So and take a look at with this. Okay, so this was a publication by FireEye. They do car hacking too. Look at the exterior of the car. I spent the last 5 years looking at signals that emanate from the vehicle. What can be done with that kind of stuff? What's being used? What things take, for instance, FCC, again, my legal background coming into effect, what takes being able to have a license to be able to intercept different types of communications? And what can you do as a researcher on a budget? So take a look at some of these. And then I also like this picture. Again, this is just a very broad, general picture. There are no secrets to car hacking that are encompassed in these, but this is the interior of the car. So if you get access and can actually get local access, like being able to plug into the OBD2 port, things like that, what can you learn from that? That's how we started. That's how we started learning how to shut off the airbags in our car when we were doing off-roading many, many years ago. Was what does the code look like when the airbag's about to go off, that kind of thing. So then we started learning more about, well, how does that system work? And if we want to turn it off, should we have a right to be able to? At that time, you couldn't do it without a legal reason for needing to turn off the airbag. So it's different now. Now you can sometimes have a button, but learning how all these systems work by listening in on the CAN bus, it's very easy to do. And actually you can buy Arduino, like different types of shields. Like there's a CAN bus shield you can put on the Arduino, a very easy way to start getting into car hacking. Also, one of the things I look at that's, I've worked on some legislation recently associated with this is, what about the connected roadway and the transportation infrastructure? So while many car hackers are focused on the vehicle, get the vehicle, can we hack it, what can we do with it? But what about how the vehicle communicates with the infrastructure? There's so much information that the vehicle could pass to different types of roadside units. Well, this is something that that NHTSA is, this does increase safety, is for your vehicle to be alerted if there's a problem ahead, the lights are, the traffic lights are out, something like that. So we get benefit from this type of connection. And those of us that have a smartphone, we know we have benefits from using this. It makes our life easier. But there's so much information that is on these smartphones about where we go, when we go, how we do it. But this is kind of what a city looks like to me now with the type of research I'm doing. Is the picture here on the left, kind of these bubbles of signals coming out of vehicles. Very interesting. But this is something that I think as car hacking and transportation, this is something I think more car hackers are going to be looking at in the future. And I know there've been green lights forever. I mean, there've been some presentations that are pretty neat where people have interacted with the infrastructure. Now, for me, something that I've been working on for a long time now, many years, I think it's been about 6 years, is about autonomous vehicles. It's fascinating to me, legally and technically, because the idea of either being a driver or are you driven? When you buy a car, you in control of where it goes, or do you just put in an address and it controls where you go? So I'm very interested in this, and these are the stages of automation. I believe that Tesla had said, I'm very intrigued by Tesla's company because they hire hackers. They're one of these companies that are like, car hackers, come work for us. So I'm like, yeah, okay, so keep that in mind, because I think they're hiring. Full automation, they're getting closer to this. I don't know, by the end of the year, there's been some critique saying maybe not, but this is when you can go to sleep or watch a movie and it just takes you to work. So for some of us that don't want to come out of quarantine and have to drive in the DC area every day, I'm like, I want a level 5. But one of the things that you kind of give up is some control. So how much control are you willing to give up for your vehicles? Will you ever have a choice later on to get a car that has very little computers? I met this VC once. He's like, I have a car from 1968, and after hearing your presentations, I will not sell it. He's like, that's going to be the car I drive for the next 25 years. So again, as with connected cars, how they connect to roadside units and the lights. This was actually from a 2600 group that I follow. And I happened to be in a meeting where we were talking about creating kind of like a NIST cybersecurity framework for connected vehicles and how they communicate with the infrastructure. And I'm on my phone scrolling through the chat and I'm like, oh, wow, 3 blocks from us, someone just took this picture of this box. What this box is this is from a traffic light, a very, how shall I say, heavily used intersection in Washington, D.C. And someone just posted this, and I said, you know, this is a big deal. Take a look. You know, not this in particular, but people are starting to look at the infrastructure for transportation. So I'm doing a lot of work to working on protecting that and on some frameworks for that are similar to the NIST cybersecurity framework, but for transportation specific applications. So what can you do? So I'm getting to the point for all of you. There is a program that back in 2012, I was one of 3 employees at Battelle, the Battelle Institute, where we created this Cyber Auto Challenge, and it's pretty cool. It's still going on. This is an old slide, but they did cancel it for this year, but it's going on next year. So let me tell you about, can you be a part of this? Are you interested in some of the stuff I've talked about? Try to do this. Okay, so if you're a high school student, great news. There's an opportunity for you. You don't have to be in college or grad school to do this stuff. So this is a slide that Battelle has for the Cyber Auto Challenge. So this is theirs, it's public. But what you'll be doing is, the automobile manufacturers put these cars in a warehouse and you get to hack them for a week, but not without instruction. You have like a few days of classes, then you have like all-night hackathons. So if that's your thing, that is fantastic. However, they also have people from the government that are there to learn. So the teams are made up of high school, college, government, industry. So even people from, how shall I say, like the insurance industry and stuff, they learn about this by being on a team. So your team will have a lot of different types of people on it, and you'll have a goal that you're going to hack the car at the end of the program, and you all learn from each other. So I'm a big supporter of this. I tell all my university students about this. I should tell my graduate students at Berkeley about this too for next year, but it's a really great program. It's free. If you can get yourself to Detroit, it is free. I mean, room and board and is paid for. So that's one of the things you can do if you want to learn about this. So this is one of my last Cory Doctorow quotes. If self-driving cars can only be safe if we are sure no one can reconfigure them without manufacturer approval, we'll never be safe. So I'm telling you, there is hope. Again, I'm not picking on Tesla. This is just, I love the graphic here. But there are companies that seek to hire hackers. Mentalities have changed about being scared about people accessing systems from most original equipment manufacturers. And I'm still working with others to get them more comfortable with the fact of learn from hackers, learn from people that do street racing, car modding, and even into the gray areas and illegalities associated with vehicles. Learn how the stuff is done, how cars are chopped, how stuff's taken apart. You won't learn that at Battelle at the Cyber Auto Challenge, but if you can learn how these systems work from others that don't think exactly like you do, it's fantastic. And that's one of the reasons why, too, for this program, it's high school students who are really good with computers. If you have an interest or an aptitude, try going, because you're going to be able to contribute more than you might think. So because I've seen some high school students that have fantastic abilities. And again, I know this is coming from a university professor. I mean, I am an instructor at 2 universities, but you don't need a college degree to be able to do a lot of this stuff. I have, I think, 4 graduate degrees and a doctorate. I am self-taught in most of this, as are many people from my generation. Your generation has the opportunity to go do cybersecurity programs, get a bachelor's in science and that kind of stuff. But for what I did, it's you can be self-taught and do a lot of this, but learn how to do, create a research project, come up with some ideas, find the resources. Like if you're into cars, the Cyber Auto Challenge. There are other types of red team challenges that you can do, but you're going to help make this stuff safer. And so what can you do as a hardware and software engineer? Do your training, even the free training online, participate in that stuff. Learn secure software and hardware engineering. In fact, I wanted to show you this. This is something, actually, I learned to solder from Mitch Altman at one of the HOPE conferences and also at CCC. So for my university students, we talk about the rubber ducky. In one of the programs, we actually watch an episode of Oh God! Oh goodness. Okay, just we watched some episodes of people doing different kinds of hacks in movies and all that. So one of them is someone using an evil rubber ducky. It was a little too expensive, so I built my own for $7. I got a grant to be able to put this together, but the rubber ducky does nothing for this, but it kind of emulates what it is. But inside is Arduino Nano, and on it are the programs that are used. They're similar to the evil rubber ducky or evil maid type of programs. And the reason I teach my students this is, again, learn how this stuff is exploited, and you'll learn how to be a better software engineer. So that is about secure software engineering. And I also teach them about hardware vulnerability. So if you're, that's another one of my hobbies, is software and hardware type of security. Think about the ramifications of the code. If you are the guy who's pulling that lever in one of the slides I had before with the trolley, that's going to be something you think about, because what you do professionally is going to affect a lot of people. So there are whistleblowing programs, things like that, that have to do not just with national security, but if you find things that might end up in the stream of products that do affect safety and security, there are protections for you if you do want to do a disclosure that something that just doesn't seem right with your company's product. So there are ways that you can talk about that. So what can you do as an employer? For those of you who might be watching, do bug bounty programs, please, because it makes it easier for people like me who bring you security researchers saying they don't, they just want to tell you what the problem is. Please don't threaten legal action. You need to know this information. Wouldn't you rather know than not? And hire some internal and external red teams. I do think that doing vuln scans and stuff like that is good defense, but when it really comes to understanding where your problems are, the red teams. So that works both on hardware, software, networks, everything. So do your red team and hire hackers to do that, because they think in a way that might be different than your development engineers. Pay for their training and reward completion. I have been through so many companies where it is very difficult to get the training that you request, in particular if you're asking to do red team type of training. So please do that for your employees, because they're going to bring a benefit to your company that you may not have seen before. So facilitate a culture in your company that encourages reporting of these types of security issues. I've had some clients that have quit companies because they have not wanted to go up against the company with the vulnerability that they found. They were bullied. They were having some problems with management. So it's one of the things to consider for creating that. So, all right. Thank you. That is my presentation, and I hope I've been able to tell you about, even from a different type of background than straight up like cybersecurity, bachelor's in science degrees. I mean, if you're doing that, that's great, and you have a really good start. But for those of you that want either college is not an option, or you want to do this on your own, there are ways to do it. And I've done it. If I can do it, you can do it. And this is a picture of me, my jungle boots, my jungle hat. I got my start both with learning from my dad about how he was hired to break into places, how exciting, and you got paid to do this. This is a fun field. I wish I could tell you about some of the projects I'm working on now. I can't, but I love it. It's different every day. But I got my start literally by getting my boots dirty in the Amazon basin, tracking something to like a 0 day. I found it, and I found something new about it. And it was, it really started me on this path of I want to know how to do more. So anyway, I hope I have been able to inspire some of you. And if you have any questions, I got a little bit of time to answer some of your questions if you have any. Okay, let me stop the slide share. Okay, let me take a look. Oh, the bookshelf behind me. Okay, sure. Okay, for those of you that do computer architecture, computer organization of design, this is the Bible for learning about, for computer architecture. That means learning about stuff down on the hardware level. I think this book is old enough that it might even have like MIPS instruction language and stuff in it. So I do this as well. Radios. So what I do now has a lot to do with radios. So I'm learning about these things all the time. The rest of these are legal books. mergers and acquisitions. That hasn't been one I've used yet, but I did take this in law school. And I don't know, sometimes when I win pitch contests for my company, this is one of the things I won. It wasn't money, but I got a can of this. Okay, so this was a great win. And up here, these are challenge coins. I've done work for the government, and when you do stuff that's kind of exceptional, you get one of these. And these are some patches I've gotten from some friends for military type of projects that I've done in the past. So that's what's behind me for that. Oh, please, as I missed that a little, there it was at the end. My microphone maybe was too close to my mouth. Sorry about that. I didn't see that earlier. What advice would you have to inspire other people to find their own journey? Find something that interests you. I know that sounds very, very generic, but you have to be excited and motivated to excel in something. I meet a lot of students when I do talks like this to high school students who are in accelerated like AP type of programs, but they're not happy. And I've met some, in particular, there's one in the county where I live in Northern Virginia where it's a really cool opportunity that you can do the AP classes in computer science. They even have a simulated type of red team hacking that can be done, but you can also learn welding, and they have auto mechanics. They even have food science for people that are interested in starting businesses associated with baking and all that. So you have to really love this stuff. And I think a lot of that initially came from watching my dad do what he did. So that was, that's how I would recommend it is you find something that interests you. Maybe it's voting machines, and that'll be great. Do that before our November election. So something like that. So that's what I would suggest. Okay. Anyway, so just briefly in closing, you either going to decide if you're driven or you're going to be the driver. And a lot has to do with being able to control the code. So as a security researcher, for a hacker, we need to be able to have these protections. So I hope for some of you, watch what's going on with the new Computer Fraud and Abuse Act type of amendments, things that are being changed with it. Watch what's going on with the DMCA. And next year, when we have the next Library of Congress opportunity to be able to say, should we open up the DMCA for hackers for this stuff? I think your answer is going to be, please, yes, and get involved. So there are opportunities for technical, legal, policy people, even sociology about how hacks occur and what you can do to train people, employees, for them to protect themselves. So anyway, thank you very much. I'm so glad that that 2600 and Hope allowed me to come here. And it's been 20 years being able to attend your conferences. I love it. Thank you so much, and all right, have a good rest of the conference.